We all spend so much of our lives navigating relationships, don't we? Family, friends, partners. It's this constant thing.
It really
And
is.
sometimes it feels like this intricate dance, and you wonder, why do some connections just flow while others, well, it feels like you're just constantly stepping on each other's toes.
Absolutely. And, human connection is just so fundamental. It's a really fascinating area to explore systematically,
Right.
which is exactly what relationship science tries to do, to
Mhm.
kind of understand the mechanics behind it all, what shapes our closest bonds.
And that's what we're doing today, isn't it? A really deep dive, drawing from what seems like a really authoritative source, Rowland S. Miller's Intimate Relationships, the ninth edition.
Oh, it's incredibly comprehensive. Miller's work is built on decades of research.
So this is like our guided tour through the essentials, the bedrock of understanding why relationships tick.
Exactly. It's remarkably thorough. We're going to really unpack a huge landscape today, starting with the basics, like what even is intimacy and how society shapes our expectations,
Okay.
and then moving through how we connect, the challenges we face, how things evolve, or sometimes how they fall apart. The idea is really to cover all the bases, leave no stone unturned, so to speak.
Yeah, pull out those core ideas, those aha moments that give you a clearer picture of what's going on in your own life, your own relationships.
Hopefully, yeah, a clearer perspective.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Where do we start? The building blocks.
The building blocks, exactly. Chapter 1 in Miller's book lays that crucial groundwork. It starts by really dissecting intimacy. What is it, and why is it so important?
And not just a fuzzy feeling, right? He defines it more concretely.
Precisely. He breaks it down into these key components that all interconnect. There's knowledge, like that deep personal understanding you have of a partner.
Knowing their secrets, their quirks.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Then interdependence, how your lives are intertwined, how you rely on and influence each other.
Makes sense.
Caring, just genuine affection and concern. Trust that expectation of fairness, knowing they've got your back.
Crucial.
Responsiveness, how you actually attend to and support each other's needs. Mutuality, that feeling of us, a shared identity.
The we factor.
Exactly. And finally, commitment, the intention to keep the relationship going. When these things are present, that's what Miller defines as true intimacy.
Okay, so it's this whole package deal. Knowing, relying, caring, trusting, being responsive, feeling like a team and wanting it to last. What's the big takeaway there?
The big takeaway is that this isn't just nice to have, it's fundamental. Intimacy fulfills a basic human need.
Yeah.
We are, wired for connection.
Like biologically.
Yeah, arguably. These components aren't just desirable, they're essential for our psychological well-being, even our physical health. When that need isn't met, it can really take a toll.
That definitely resonates. That feeling of being truly seen and understood. It's powerful. But how does culture fit in? Because intimacy looks pretty different around the world, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. While the need might be universal, how it's expressed, how it's valued, even experienced, it's heavily shaped by culture. Miller gives loads of examples.
Like what?
Well, think about choosing a partner. In some cultures, arranged marriages are still the norm, right? Family and society weigh in heavily, maybe more than individual romance.
Very different from the Western ideal.
Totally. Or public displays of affection completely normal somewhere, maybe really frowned upon elsewhere. Even what makes a relationship successful can vary. In more collectivist societies, the family unit might come before individual happiness in the partnership.
Which is a big contrast to the individual focus we often see here. So our culture provides the script, the unwritten rules.
Kind of, yeah. It sets the stage. And then the book talks about how our personal past experiences, especially with our early caregivers, shape things.
Ah, attachment styles.
Exactly. Those patterns of relating that tend to stick with us. Miller covers the main ones: secure, comfortable with closeness and independence.
That's the ideal, sort of.
Often seen that way, yes.
Hmm.
Then anxious, ambivalent, wanting closeness but fearing rejection. And avoidant, tending to suppress intimacy needs, keeping distance.
And these come from childhood.
Largely, yes. These early experiences create these internal working models of relationships. They really influence how we approach and act in our adult connections.
Wow, so those early bonds cast a really long shadow. What's the practical point here?
The practical point is understanding your own attachment style and maybe your partner's can be incredibly revealing.
How so?
It helps you understand why you react certain ways in certain situations. Recognizing those patterns is the first step towards maybe shifting towards healthier ways of relating.
That's super insightful, understanding the roots of our tendencies. Okay, so beyond culture and our past, what about just us, our personalities?
Individual differences are huge, obviously. Personality traits like how agreeable or conscientious you are, your core values, your beliefs, even your specific skills or habits.
All the things that make you you.
Right.
Mm.
And all of that interacts with your partner's traits. It creates this unique interpersonal chemistry. Miller emphasizes that appreciating these differences helps with empathy and navigating friction.
So, recognizing we're just wired differently helps smooth things over. What about like the bigger picture, human nature itself?
Yeah, the book touches on evolutionary perspectives too. The idea that some basic relationship tendencies might have evolved because they helped our ancestors survive and reproduce.
Like mate selection preferences?
Potentially, yeah. Preferences for traits linked to health or fertility, for instance. Even attachment behaviors needing protection when we're young can be seen through an evolutionary lens.
So, some instincts might have deep historical roots.
Possibly. It's often subtle, not conscious, but it offers another layer of understanding for some of our basic motivations. But importantly, it's not all about biology or the past.
Right, relationships happen between people, the interaction itself.
Exactly. Miller really stresses the role of interaction. Relationships aren't static. They're constantly being shaped by our day-to-day exchanges.
How we talk, how we support each other, handle disagreements.
All of it, the quality of those shared experiences. Positive interactions build the bond, negative ones can chip away at it. That ongoing back and forth is the relationship in many ways.
So it's the dance itself that matters most. Now, chapter 1 also mentions the dark side. Why bring that up so early?
It's about realism, really.
Mm,
Not all relationship dynamics are positive. There's conflict, negativity, sometimes even abuse or betrayal.
unfortunately, yes.
Acknowledging that from the start gives a more complete picture. It normalizes the idea that relationships face challenges, and studying those difficulties is just as vital as studying the good stuff.
A necessary dose of reality. Relationships can hurt as much as they can fulfill. And didn't that chapter end with some practical tips?
It did, yeah. Suggestions for satisfaction. Things derived directly from the research covered.
Like, what sort of things?
Nurturing the friendship aspect with your partner, striving for fairness, communicating clearly about needs and feelings, being willing to adapt. Concrete, actionable stuff based on those foundational principles.
Okay, so chapter 1 gives this really rich, multifaceted view. Individual factors, culture, human nature, past experiences, and crucially, the interactions, a solid foundation. Where do we go next? How do we even know all this stuff?
That leads perfectly into chapter 2.
Hmm.
Research methods, how relationship science actually works. Miller starts with a bit of history.
It's a distinct field now.
Relatively, yes. People have thought about relationships forever, obviously, but applying rigorous scientific methods is more recent, really took off in the latter half of the 20th century.
Interesting that something so personal became a focus of science. Why the shift?
Well, several things. Better research tools, better statistics, but also just a growing recognition of how important relationships are for well-being, both individual and societal.
Hmm.
Researchers saw the potential to get a deeper, more empirical understanding.
Okay, so with this scientific lens, what kinds of questions do they ask? How does it start?
It starts, as Miller explains, with developing research questions. These might come from existing theories or observing real-world patterns, maybe therapists noticing trends or even just personal curiosity.
Like, why do some couples argue constantly about money?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Then they turn that question into a testable hypothesis, a specific prediction about what they expect to find.
Classic science. Question, hypothesis, test. How do they test it, though? Getting people to talk about their relationships must be tricky.
It is. The chapter covers how they get participants. Surveys, ad-seeking couples, recruiting from specific places like universities or clinics.
Finding the right people.
Right. And getting a diverse representative sample is crucial if you want the findings to apply more broadly. But Miller acknowledges it's challenging, studying such private lives.
I can imagine. So once they have participants, what kinds of studies do they actually run?
Miller outlines several main research designs. You've got correlational studies looking at how two things are associated.
Like, does more communication equal more happiness?
Exactly. But remember, correlation isn't causation. Just because two things go together doesn't mean one causes the other.
Got it. What else?
Then there are experimental studies. That's where you manipulate something, the independent variable, to see its effect on something else, the dependent variable.
Like assigning couples to different communication workshops.
Precisely. And seeing if one workshop leads to higher satisfaction than another, that can help establish cause and effect. And then there are longitudinal studies.
Following people over time.
Yes, tracking the same couples or individuals for months, years, even decades. That lets you see how relationships change and develop. Each design has pros and cons, so often researchers use a mix.
Makes sense. Correlational for links, experimental for cause, longitudinal for change over time. What kind of actual data do they collect?
All sorts. Self-reports are really common. Questionnaires, surveys, interviews, where people describe their own feelings, thoughts, behaviors.
Asking people directly.
Yep. Then there's observational data researchers actually watching couples interact, maybe in a lab or sometimes in their homes. That gives insight into actual behavior.
See it in action.
And increasingly, physiological measures are used too. Heart rate, stress hormones like cortisol, blood pressure, trying to get more objective biological markers of what's happening emotionally and physically.
Wow, getting down to the biological level, that's fascinating. But studying such personal stuff, ethics must be a huge concern.
Absolutely paramount. Miller really emphasizes this. Things like informed consent, people knowing what they're signing up for, confidentiality, anonymity, minimizing any potential harm or distress, debriefing people properly afterward.
Essential safeguards.
Totally. Researchers have strict ethical guidelines they have to follow to protect participants.
That's good to hear. So they collect all this data. How do they make sense of it? How do they draw conclusions?
Well, they use statistical analysis to find meaningful patterns, looking for results that are unlikely to be just random chance, statistically significant findings.
Crunching the numbers.
Right. And Miller stresses interpreting those findings in light of existing theories and past research. Science is iterative, right? One study informs the next question. He also mentions the challenge of integrating findings from different studies using different methods. Building the big picture often means synthesizing evidence from many sources.
So it's this ongoing cycle. Investigate, analyze, interpret, integrate, ask new questions. Okay, so we understand the building blocks and how we study them. Let's get to the spark. Attraction. Chapter 3, right? What pulls us towards someone?
Exactly. Chapter 3 dives into attraction. And the first, maybe most basic factor Miller highlights is proximity, just being physically near someone.
Simple nearness, like the person who sits next to you in class.
Yep. It significantly increases the chances of attraction forming. Familiarity often breeds liking, especially initially.
The mere exposure effect.
That's the one. Repeated exposure, just seeing someone regularly, neighbors, colleagues, can increase liking, assuming those encounters aren't negative.
So just being around someone can make them more appealing. Interesting. What else factors in early on?
Physical attractiveness is a big one, obviously. Miller discusses societal standards of beauty, noting they vary across cultures and time.
True. What's considered attractive changes.
But he also points out some cross-cultural consistencies, signs of health, vitality, often symmetry, and he explains the halo effect.
Ah, where we assume attractive people have other good qualities too, like they're smarter or kinder.
Exactly. It's a cognitive bias. We see attractiveness, and it casts this positive glow, leading us to infer other good traits, even without evidence.
Is there any truth to it, though? Are attractive people actually better in other ways?
Not necessarily. They might get some social advantages, sure,
Right.
but the halo effect often leads to inaccurate judgments. Miller also brings up the matching hypothesis,
What's that?
the idea that we tend to pair up with people who are roughly similar to us in terms of physical attractiveness. We kind of find our league, so to speak.
Okay, so we might be drawn to beauty, but we're also somewhat realistic about who might be interested back. Where do things like personality fit in?
Well, next comes reciprocity. This is powerful. We tend to like people who like us.
Makes sense. It feels good to be liked.
It's validating, a self-esteem boost. Knowing someone finds you interesting or attractive often makes them more attractive to you.
A positive feedback loop.
Definitely. And then there's similarity. This is huge. We're generally drawn to people who share our values, attitudes, interests, backgrounds.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Pretty much. Similarity makes interactions smoother, validates our own views, reduces potential conflict points, just feels comfortable, familiar.
Creates that common ground. Now, what about the whole men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing? Does Miller get into gender differences in attraction?
He addresses it, yeah, but very carefully, cautioning against overgeneralization. Some evolutionary theories propose average differences, like maybe men prioritizing youth attractiveness slightly more, women prioritizing resources status slightly more.
But those are just averages, right? Not rules.
Exactly. Broad statistical trends, not destiny for any individual. Culture plays a massive role too, and individual desires are incredibly diverse. It's really important not to lean on stereotypes here.
Good point. So attraction is this complex mix, being nearby, looks, liking being returned, having things in common. A lot goes into that initial pull. What happens next? How do we start forming actual impressions of people?
That takes us to chapter 4, social cognition, how we think about others and our relationships. It starts with first impressions.
And they stick, don't they?
Miller emphasizes they can have a surprisingly lasting impact. We make quick judgments based on limited info, and these initial impressions act like filters for everything we learn later.
Hard to shake that first feeling, even if it's wrong.
It can be. Then Miller explores the power of our perceptions generally, including cognitive biases that color how we see things. Confirmation bias is a big one.
Seeking out info that confirms what we already think.
Exactly. We tend to look for evidence that supports our existing beliefs about someone, and ignore or downplay stuff that contradicts it. Another key thing is attributional processes.
How we explain behavior.
Yes. Why did our partner do that? If they're late, is it because they're inconsiderate, an internal attribution, or because traffic was awful, an external one? The explanations we choose really affect our feelings.
Those biases can really twist things if you already think negatively of someone.
You're likely to interpret their actions negatively. Precisely. Miller also discusses impression management.
Trying to control how others see us.
Basically, yeah. The conscious and unconscious efforts we make to present ourselves favorably. From carefully choosing first date outfits and conversation topics to maintaining a certain image in a long-term relationship, we all do it to some extent.
We're all kind of performers, putting our best foot forward. How does this affect how well we actually know our partners then?
That's a central question of the chapter. Intimacy implies deep knowing, but Miller points out factors that help or hinder accuracy. Our motivation, do we really want to understand them?
Sometimes maybe we don't.
Could be. How observable are certain traits? Some things are easier to see than others. And crucially, how open and honest is the communication?
Self-disclosure, sharing personal stuff.
Essential for building understanding. But even in really close relationships, Miller notes, there can be hidden depth, perspectives we're just not fully aware of.
It's humbling, really. We might feel close, but maybe we never fully know someone.
Okay, so impressions are formed, perceptions are working.
Yeah.
How do we actually connect day to day? Build those bonds.
Communication. Chapter 5 is all about it. And Miller starts with nonverbal communication.
Body language, tone of voice.
Exactly. Facial expressions, eye contact, touch, posture, even how close we stand. He stresses that a huge chunk of meaning comes through these nonverbal channels, often unconsciously. They powerfully impact how messages land.
Yeah, a sarcastic tone can completely change the meaning of words. Totally. A warm smile can say more than sentences. Then the chapter moves to verbal communication, starting with self-disclosure.
Sharing personal information.
Right. Revealing things about ourselves. Miller says appropriate self-disclosure is vital for intimacy and trust. It lets us feel seen. But it's also about vulnerability, so timing and how much you share matters.
Sharing hopes, fears, that creates connection, but takes courage. What else in verbal communication?
Active listening is key. Really paying attention, showing you understand both the words and the feelings behind them.
Not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Right. Using techniques like paraphrasing, asking clarifying questions, showing empathy, prevents misunderstandings and makes your partner feel heard, validated. The chapter also touches on communication styles.
How people tend to communicate.
Yeah, like is someone generally direct, indirect, supportive, critical? A consistently negative style, like always being critical or dismissive, is obviously bad news for the relationship.
Yeah. So it's about truly hearing each other, not just talking at each other. What about when communication goes wrong? The bad patterns.
Ah, yes. Chapter 5 covers dysfunctional communication patterns, too. These can be really damaging. Miller highlights John Gottman's famous 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
I've heard of those. Criticism.
Yes. Attacking the partner's personality or character, not just the behavior. Then defensiveness, making excuses, counterattacking instead of listening.
Stonewalling.
That's shutting down, withdrawing, refusing to engage. And the worst one, contempt expressing disdain, disrespect, often with sarcasm, eye-rolling, insults.
Ouch. Those sound destructive.
Miller emphasizes they are strong predictors of relationship distress, even divorce. But he also offers antidotes, more constructive approaches.
Like what? How do you fight the horsemen?
Instead of criticism, use I statements. I feel hurt when. rather than you always.
Yeah.
For defensiveness, try taking even a little responsibility. For stonewalling, the antidote is to take a break if you're overwhelmed, but crucially, agree to come back to the conversation later. Don't just disappear.
Right, planned breaks.
And for contempt,
Yeah.
well, the antidote is actively cultivating respect and appreciation for your partner. Focusing on the positive. Learning to communicate constructively, especially during disagreements, is vital.
It really sounds like being mindful, being aware of these patterns, and actively choosing better ways to interact. Okay, communication is huge. What about the balance of things, the give and take?
That brings us to Chapter 6, Interdependency, often viewed through the lens of social exchange theory.
Social exchange, like a cost-benefit analysis?
Kind of, yeah. The theory suggests we evaluate relationships based on the rewards we get, companionship, support, fun, etc., versus the costs, effort, time, stress, sacrifices.
Things we put in versus things we get out.
Right. And we compare this balance to two things. First, our comparison level, basically, our expectations for what relationships should be like based on past experiences and observations.
Our personal standard.
Exactly. And second, our comparison level for alternatives, our perception of how rewarding other potential relationships or even being single might be.
So how good is this compared to my expectations? And how good is it compared to my other options? Is this all conscious calculation?
Not always. Sometimes, sure, especially if things are rocky.
Yeah.
But a lot of it could be more implicit, gut-level feelings. Miller talks about the economies of relationships, the flow of resources, tangible and intangible.
Like who does chores versus who gives emotional support?
Could be, yeah. When the costs consistently outweigh the rewards, or when those alternatives start looking way better, satisfaction and stability can drop. It needs to feel reasonably equitable, fair.
But surely it's not all just self-interest. Aren't we sometimes just nice because we care?
That's a really important point Miller addresses. While social exchange highlights rewards and costs, it doesn't mean we're purely selfish. Altruism, empathy, commitment, they matter hugely. We also do things for our partner's benefit, even at a cost to ourselves, because we care and we're invested.
Okay, so it's not just cold calculation. Genuine care is part of the equation. And speaking of investment, Chapter 6 also covers commitment.
Yes, commitment is key.
Yeah.
The intention to continue the relationship. Miller discusses different types. There's personal commitment. You stay because you're attracted. You want to be there.
I want to.
Right. Then moral commitment, staying out of a sense of obligation, duty, maybe values about marriage.
The ought to.
And constraint commitment, staying because leaving is too difficult or costly. Shared finances, kids, social networks, lack of alternatives.
The have to.
Exactly. Understanding these different flavors of commitment helps explain why people stay together, even through tough times. It's often a mix of these factors.
So commitment is this complex glue driven by desire, duty, and difficulty of leaving. Okay, now Miller shifts focus a bit, right, to friendship.
He does. Chapter 7 looks at the unique nature of friendship. How is it different from romance?
How does he define it?
Typically by affection, companionship, trust, respect, just enjoying being together. Friendships usually lack the intense passion and sexual desire of romance, and they tend to be less exclusive, with fewer formal commitments. Intimacy exists, but maybe looks different.
Yeah, friendships are so important, but they feel different. A different kind of support, maybe.
Absolutely. And the chapter explores how friendships change across the lifespan. Childhood friendships based on play.
Teenage friendships for identity and support.
Adult friendships around shared careers or family life. And friendships in old age, providing vital connection. Our needs change, and so do the roles our friends play.
Fascinating how they evolve with us. Does he talk about differences, like between men's and women's friendships?
Yes, Chapter 7 touches on potential gender differences and also differences related to sexual orientation. There's research exploring, for instance, if women's friendships tend to be more emotionally expressive than men's. Well, Miller cautions against stereotypes. While some average differences might exist in studies, the variation within genders is often huge. It's more nuanced than simple stereotypes suggest. He also discusses same-sex friendships and friendships across different orientations.
Right, avoid the cliches. Friendships face challenges too, I assume.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Conflict, betrayal of trust, jealousy if one friend feels left out. Distance can be a big one, or just changing life circumstances making it hard to stay connected. Friendships drift apart sometimes. They take effort too.
So even these important bonds need tending. Okay, let's tackle the big one, love. Chapter 8, what's the scientific take on love?
It's a huge topic. Miller starts with a quick historical look at how the idea of love, especially romantic love as a basis for marriage, evolved in Western culture. It wasn't always the primary focus it is now.
Right, practical considerations used to be more central.
Then he gets into different types of love. A major distinction is between passionate love and companionate love.
Passionate is the fiery, intense, can't eat, can't sleep kind.
Pretty much. Intense emotions, strong sexual desire, preoccupation with the person. Companionate love is more the deep affection, trust, intimacy, and commitment found in long-term, stable relationships.
The comfortable, steady bond.
Exactly. Miller also discusses Sternberg's triangular theory. Love is having three components: intimacy, warmth, closeness, passion, the drive, romance, sex, and commitment, the decision to stay.
Intimacy, passion, commitment, like corners of a triangle.
Right. And different combinations create different kinds of love. Intimacy plus passion, romantic love. Intimacy plus commitment, companionate love. Passion plus commitment without much intimacy, fatuous love.
Like a whirlwind marriage based only on passion.
Could be an example. And if you have all three,
Right.
intimacy, passion, and commitment, Sternberg calls that consummate love, the complete form.
That's a really helpful framework. And does love tie back to attachment styles again?
It does.
Yeah.
Chapter 8 links them. Our early attachment patterns influence how we experience and behave in romantic love. Secure folks tend to have more trusting, satisfying love lives. Anxious or avoidant styles can bring different challenges.
That theme again, early experiences echoing forward. What about cultural takes on love?
Huge variations there, too. What counts as romantic? The importance placed on love for marriage. It differs widely. Arranged marriages still exist. Even within one culture, people express and feel love differently. Think love language.
Words, actions, gifts, time, touch.
Right. It's shaped by culture and individual preference. Finally, the chapter asks, does love last? Especially passionate love.
Can that initial intensity endure?
Miller suggests that passionate love often tends to cool down over time. Familiarity, novelty wearing off. It's natural. But companionate love, the deeper affection, trust, commitment, can actually deepen and sustain relationships long term.
So the fireworks might fade, but a strong, warm fire can keep burning.
That's the idea. Factors like shared values, good communication, support, actively nurturing the connection, those help love endure and evolve.
That's encouraging. Okay, moving from the heart to, well, something closely related. Chapter 9, sexuality. How does Miller approach this?
Chapter 9 looks at sexuality within relationships. It starts by acknowledging the huge diversity of sexual attitudes and beliefs out there on premarital sex, casual sex, same-sex relationships, the role of sex in general.
Lots of different views influenced by culture, religion, personal values.
Exactly. And attitudes change over time. Then he gives an overview of sexual behavior, stressing there's no single normal. The key is open communication, mutual respect for desires, needs, boundaries, consent, comfort, shared pleasure, define healthy sexuality.
Communication and respect, again, seems crucial here. What makes for sexual satisfaction?
It's multifaceted, not just the physical mechanics like arousal or orgasm. Emotional intimacy, feeling desired, feeling connected during sex, the overall relationship quality, these are huge factors. Sexual satisfaction is deeply tied to emotional well-being.
So it's much more than just physical. Unfortunately, the chapter also has to cover a darker aspect.
Yes, it addresses the critical issue of sexual coercion. Any sexual activity without free, willing consent. Miller outlines how it can happen: pressure, manipulation, force, and emphasizes the profound harm it causes to victims and relationships. Trust is shattered.
A vital point. Consent is non-negotiable. Anything less is harmful and unacceptable. Okay, shifting now to relationship challenges more broadly. Chapter 10, stresses and strains. What kind of difficulties does this cover?
It covers a range of common relational stressors. It starts with perceived relational value.
How much we feel valued by our partner.
Exactly. How much we feel liked, accepted, important to them. When we sense that value is low or dropping, it causes significant hurt.
That feeling of not mattering to someone you care about, yeah, that cuts deep.
The chapter explores hurt feelings, common triggers like rejection, criticism, being ignored, betrayal. It also looks at ostracism, being deliberately excluded or ignored. Even the silent treatment can be incredibly damaging.
Social rejection within the relationship itself. What other strains?
Jealousy gets a detailed look. Miller distinguishes reactive jealousy, response to a real threat, from suspicious jealousy, unfounded insecurity. Causes can include low self-esteem, relationship insecurity, feeling like you have no alternatives.
Jealousy seems fueled by fear. And what about trust issues?
Chapter 10 tackles deception and lying, why people do it, and the major negative impact on trust and intimacy, even with supposedly small white lies, and then betrayal, major violations of trust and loyalty, like infidelity or other deeply hurtful acts.
Honesty and trust are just fundamental. Betrayal can be so hard to overcome. Does the chapter end on a more hopeful note with forgiveness?
Yes, it examines forgiveness, letting go of resentment, and the desire for revenge after a transgression. Miller notes it's complex, takes time, isn't always possible or easy, but when it happens, it can be crucial for healing for both the hurt partner and the relationship's future.
Forgiveness as releasing yourself, not necessarily condoning the act. Okay, moving from internal strains to direct clashes. Chapter 11. Conflict. It's inevitable, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Miller defines conflict simply as occurring when partners' goals, desires, or actions seem incompatible.
Yeah.
The key isn't avoiding conflict, but how couples manage it. That's often what determines relationship health.
So it's not if you fight, but how you fight. How does conflict usually play out?
Miller describes typical patterns. Escalation through negative reciprocity, negativity breeding more negativity.
Tit for tat.
Right. And the demand withdrawal pattern, one partner pushing for change, the other pulling away. Recognizing these cycles in your own arguments is the first step to changing them.
Becoming aware of those destructive dances. Are the outcomes of conflict always bad?
Not necessarily. If handled poorly, yes, resentment, distress, damage. But if managed constructively, conflict can actually lead to better understanding, finding solutions, and even strengthening the relationship. It can be an opportunity for growth.
Handled well, it can actually be productive. Okay, chapter 12 gets into heavier territory. Power and violence. How does power work in relationships?
Miller explains power stems from interdependence, who controls resources the other partner values. That could be money, affection, decision-making ability. The partner with more control over needed resources often has more power. Imbalances can affect everything.
Subtle but significant dynamics. And then the chapter addresses violence.
Tragically, yes. Physical, emotional, verbal abuse. Miller discusses its prevalence, contributing factors, and the devastating impact on victims. He stresses it's a complex problem with no single cause, needing broad approaches for prevention and help.
A really difficult but crucial topic. Understanding power and violence is vital for recognizing and stopping harm. Okay, we're nearing the end of the book's journey. Chapter 13, Dissolution and Loss. Why do relationships end?
Miller looks at changing divorce rates and potential drivers, shifting societal attitudes, economic stress, changing expectations for marriage.
Broader societal trends. What about specific predictors within a relationship?
Research points to several things: frequent, intense conflict, lack of positive feelings or connection, and those four horsemen we talked about: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, contempt, strong warning signs.
Seeing those patterns might signal trouble ahead. How do breakups actually happen?
Chapter 13 details different strategies, from direct and honest talks to more indirect avoidant methods. It also explores the emotional roller coaster: sadness, anger, confusion, grief. The experience varies hugely depending on the relationship, the reasons, how people cope.
Never easy. What about adjusting afterwards?
Miller examines the adjustment process, coping strategies like seeking support, self-care, reframing the experience. Most people do adjust and move forward eventually, though the timeline varies a lot. Healing happens.
A reminder that even after painful endings, recovery is possible. And finally, chapter 14 offers hope, maintaining and repairing relationships. How do we keep things strong?
This last chapter focuses on proactive maintenance and repair. Miller highlights behaviors like showing positivity and affection, being open, giving assurances of commitment, sharing tasks fairly, engaging with each other's social circles, ongoing efforts.
Actively nurturing the bond, not taking it for granted. What about fixing things when they go wrong?
For repair after conflict or betrayal, Miller discusses acknowledging responsibility, sincere apologies, offering support, and, again, forgiveness. Rebuilding trust is often the core challenge. Couples therapy can also be a big help for serious issues.
So repair takes work, honesty, willingness from both sides. What's the final takeaway from Miller on relationships?
The concluding thought is really about the ongoing, dynamic nature of it all. Healthy, fulfilling relationships aren't static endpoints. They require continuous effort, good communication, understanding, and adapting together as life changes.
Wow, okay. We have covered so much ground, an incredible deep dive into Miller's intimate relationships. It really underscores the complexity, doesn't it? From attraction to conflict to maintenance, it's a whole journey.
It really is. And what stands out most, I think, is how interconnected Everything is. Past affects present, thoughts affect actions, communication affects the bond. It's all linked.
Absolutely. Understanding those principles gives you such a powerful framework for thinking about your own connections.
Definitely. It's not just about finding the right person, is it? It's so much about how we interact, how we communicate, the effort we put in day after day.
It really makes you think about the active role we play. And for anyone wanting more, Miller's book is clearly the place to go for even deeper insights.
Without a doubt. A truly comprehensive resource.
So as you listening think back on all this, maybe consider what's one aspect of your own relationships, past or present, that you might see a bit differently now. How could understanding these dynamics empower you, either to navigate challenges better or just strengthen the good things you already have? It's certainly given me a lot to mull over.